Hello and welcome to Mission Not Impossible, the Chinese railroad workers in the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. My name is Debbie.
And my name is Jake, and we're coming to you from the California State Railroad Museum located in the Old Sacramento State Historic Park. And we're standing in the Transcontinental Railroad Gallery, the very first place you go to when you come visit our museum.
And today we're going to talk to you about the building of the Transcontinental Railroad.
Transcontinental isn't a word we hear every day, so let's just start by breaking that word down. Trans means across, continental means continent, so a transcontinental railroad is any railroad that stretches from one side of a continent all the way to another. With the Transcontinental Railroad here in the United States, you could go all the way from New York all the way to California.
And that was a really big deal because before the Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1869, before that, the only way to get to California from, say, New York or the eastern side of the United States was by boat, by ship, or by walking across the continent. If you took a ship back then and you started in New York, you went all the way down that eastern part, all the way down around South America, up and around the western part of South America, the western part of the United States to get to California. It was a long journey that took about 4 to 6 months. If you didn't want to take a ship, then you could walk across the continent in a type of a wagon train, taking the Oregon Trail and the California Trail. That also took a very long time, 4 to 6 months. Now, in the early 1850s, they did make that ship route a little bit shorter by creating a route through Panama, so you didn't have to go all the way around South America. So that made the trip a little bit shorter by about 2 or 3 months. But all three ways of trying to get to California before the railroad, they were long, it was dangerous, very dangerous, and it was expensive.
For comparison's sake, the Transcontinental Railroad route would only take 7 days and 7 nights to get from New York to Sacramento. It was much, much cheaper, faster, and safer. In short, it was a very big deal.
It was, but building it was also a really big deal.
And that's what we're going to be talking to you about today. We're going to be talking about the Central Pacific Railroad as well as its labor force of over 90% Chinese railroad workers who did the hard work of building the western half of the Transcontinental Railroad using only hand tools in record time. And that's what we're going to be showing you off today. And if you step with me back this direction, we'll show you how it was done.
All right, let's go. So here we are standing in front of another exhibit that we have here at the California State Railroad Museum. And as you can see behind me, we can see the Chinese railroad workers working hard to build the Transcontinental Railroad. Now, before we get started, I have a riddle for you. How do you build a railroad to go over the mountain if you can't go over it and you can't go under it? A little tricky there, huh? Why don't you turn to the person next to you, and we'll just give you a few minutes to talk about how you can build a railroad over the mountain, but you can't go over it and you can't go under it. We'll give you a few minutes there to think about it. Hopefully you came up with some ideas. What do you think the answer is? If you can't go over the mountain, you can't go under it, that only leaves going through it.
Through it? Like building a tunnel big enough for a train to fit through?
Exactly, building tunnels. The Chinese railroad workers actually built 15 tunnels at the peaks of the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Some of them through solid granite rock.
We must have had some big fancy equipment like bulldozers and cranes and maybe some mechanical drills.
You might think that for today. In fact, today there is a lot of fancy equipment. So building a tunnel through a granite mountain might take a matter of days with such equipment, but that wasn't the case back in the 1850s. The Chinese railroad workers used only hand tools and explosives like black powder to build the Transcontinental Railroad.
So hand tools, what exactly does that mean?
Well, hand tools are tools that they held. Well, in fact, you know what? Right behind us here, what do you see here, Jake?
Let's see, I see a wheelbarrow, I see some shovels, I see what looks like a sledgehammer, things like that.
Yes. So those are hand tools used all by hand, but there's one other piece of equipment that they used that was very important in building the railroad through the tunnels, and it's called a star drill. This is an example of a star drill. Probably an actual one would have been a lot bigger and a lot heavier because I could lift this one. But the important thing is you can see right here at the very edge, doesn't that look a little bit like a star? So see what it looks like? It's a bar with this star on the end. And over on this piece of granite rock here, I'm going to show you what they did. So we've just walked over here to another exhibit we have here in the museum. And this is a demonstration of the Chinese railroad workers building that Transcontinental Railroad. And Jake and I are standing in front of a piece of granite rock. Hear that? That's real solid granite rock, just like what the workers would have had to get through to build those tunnels. So I'm standing here holding our star drill, and I've given Jake a hammer, and this is what the workers did. They put that star drill end here, and then the other worker would hit, and then this worker would turn it a quarter turn, hit, turn, hit, turn, hit, turn. And they did that over and over and over again until they were able to get a hole in that rock, in that granite, that they could put the explosive powder in.
So I'm still a little confused because that seems like you might get a small hole big enough for the star drill to fit through, but not quite big enough for an entire train to fit.
Yeah, I can see where that would be confusing. That's hard to understand. Actually, I have an idea. I think we need to go to the real tunnels that the Chinese railroad workers built way up in the Sierra Nevada. Should we do it?
How are we going to get there? It's like 45 minutes away and I'm not even dressed for the mountains.
We might need some help. Wait a second. Do you think that they can help us?
How?
I have an idea. Do you want to help us get up to the Sierra Nevada? All right. Here's how we're going to do it. I want you all to think about sending Jake and Debbie to the Sierra Nevada. Think really, really hard, okay? And then I'm going to count to 3, and then I want you to shout the magic word. And the magic word is huzzah. Can you say that? Huzzah. Perfect. All right. Ready? I'm going to count to 3. We'll say huzzah, and it's the magic word, and we'll see what happens, okay?
Let's give it a shot.
Ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Huzzah!
Wow, the Sierras look the exact same as the museum. They even have an exhibit kit. Oh, wait a minute. That didn't work, did it?
It didn't work, no. But you know what? We're not going to give up. I don't think the Chinese railroad workers gave up on the first try if it didn't work either, and neither will we. And maybe we just had to learn a little bit. Maybe you didn't say huzzah loud enough, or maybe someone out there wasn't thinking about the Sierra Nevada hard enough. So I say we try it again. What do you say?
Let's give it a shot.
All right. Ready? You know the drill now. Here I go. 1, 2, 3. Huzzah!
Wow. Something feels different about this place.
Yeah, it does feel a little different. Well, you know, it's not actually part of the California State Park system. This is in the Tahoe National Forest. But even though it's not a state park, we wanted to bring you here so that we could show you what it was like when the actual tunnels that the Chinese railroad workers built. This is the actual tunnel, built with nothing more than hand tools. Now that we're at the tunnel, let's see if our demonstration makes a little more sense. Do you see this hole? This was one of the holes drilled by the Chinese railroad workers
using the star drill and the sledgehammer. Do you see how our model star drill fits almost perfectly into this drill hole? Remember, these workers would have been hitting away at the star drill, slowly making dozens of holes. Eventually, they would fill them with blasting powder or black powder, light a fuse, and wait for a great big kaboom. Once the explosion went off, workers had to go back inside the tunnel to clear away the rocks and then make more holes and go through the process all over again. Now, let's go inside the tunnel. But before we do that, I want you to notice that there are no railroad tracks here. If there were railroad tracks, we would not be going inside the tunnel because it would not be safe. You can also see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Of course, since there are no tracks, that is not a train coming at us. That is just the other side of this 1,659-foot long tunnel. That's really long. If you think about how long a football field is, imagine 5 of them stacked up end to end. So how did the Chinese railroad workers get through such a long tunnel? The Central Pacific Railroad expected that a project like this would take about 3 years, and yet it took only about a year and a half, about 18 months. That's pretty remarkable. How did they do it? The railroad ran 24-hour shifts. That means 3 8-hour shifts to equal 24 hours. They were working 24 hours a day nonstop. And if you think about doing a tunnel, you might want to start at one end and then at the other end. So you're working from 2 ends going in. And that's exactly what they did. But it was still a really slow process. So they decided that in addition to the 2 ends, if they drilled in through the top, then they could drill from those directions also, which would give them 4 directions to build the tunnel. So as we were saying, this was such a big project, and it took such a long time. And we shouldn't forget the fact that many workers lost their lives building the railroad and building this tunnel. We don't know exactly how many because they didn't keep track of the numbers. But think about the weather and the conditions of using explosives. It was very dangerous work. So while we're here, we do want to remember that many men gave their lives building the railroad.
Well, thank you all for joining us on this program. This was awesome, and thank you so much for wishing us to such a unique and historic place. This is my first time seeing it in person, so thank you so much for helping make that come true.
Well, I guess maybe it's time for, but wait, there was one more thing I wanted to show everybody. If we have time, our weather's changing here, but if we have time, really like to go and show you the China Wall. That's a fascinating wall that we need to show you.
I don't think we can hike all the way down there, especially with the weather going on right now, so we might need to rely on you guys again to get us to a place where we can see China Wall.
You better wish us there, okay?
Fingers crossed.
We have to get there before it starts raining, okay? Ready?
1, 2, 3, huzzah! Wow,
Wow, we did it. Look where we are.
that is a much better shot of China Wall.
Yeah. And there's even a plaque here.
Yeah, let's see what it says. It says China Wall of the Sierra. Charles Crocker, construction chief of the Central Pacific Railroad, contracted for a workforce of approximately 12,000 Chinese laborers to push the Central Pacific tracks over its Trans-Sierra crossing on its race to east to meet with the Union Pacific at Promontory, Utah Territory. A railroad retaining wall and fill constructed of Sierra granite stands silently above the pass as a lasting monument to these Asian, quote, master builders, unquote, who left an indelible mark on the history of California and the West.
That's really interesting. But I kind of wanted to know more about the wall. That doesn't really tell me how tall it is, what it's made of. I don't know anything about it. Do you?
No, I wish we had somebody here to tell us more.
You know what? I have a friend who might be able to help us.
Well,
Do you think we can get them to help us bring him here again?
one more try?
Yeah? Do you think you all can do it? Are you ready to try to bring my friend here, my friend Nick, to see if he can help us with the China Wall? Let's give it a try,
give it a
okay?
shot.
All right, you're already experts. So I want you all to do what we did before. Remember, we counted 1, 2, 3, huzzah. So that's what we want you to do. When I count to 3, say huzzah, hope really hard so that my friend Nick can come here and he can talk to us about China Wall. All right, I'm ready. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. 1, 2, 3,
Huzzah!
huzzah!
Whoa! Hey, Jake and Debbie.
Hi there.
We
Good
did
to
it.
see you.
Hi.
How's it going, guys?
Good. Thanks for dropping in and visiting us. Thanks, everybody. It really worked. Look, this is my friend Nick, and Nick is an interpreter at the Donner Memorial State Historic Park. And Nick, our friends out there have called upon you to ask you if you can tell us anything about China Wall. Do you have any information on that?
Oh, awesome, I do. It is actually a very fascinating subject. So this amazing wall behind me is China Wall. And we've got Tunnel 7 on this side, Tunnel 8 on that side. And as you can see where the wall is placed, it is a pretty steep ravine or canyon. And back in 1866, the Chinese railroad workers actually took rock by rock and built this wall without using any cement or any mortar because it was too steep to use any of the cement or mortar. So what they did is they kind of pieced these rocks together almost like a puzzle, like one of those intricate puzzles, trying to get every piece to fit. Sometimes it's hard to find that last piece. Well, imagine not having any set pieces and having to build a wall like this. It is pretty miraculous.
It is. Do you happen to know how tall it is?
So it is a 75-foot wall, and so the bottom, like we were saying, is made to fill in the ravine or the canyon, and the top is where the train would go. So it goes right into Tunnel 8, supported the train going through there, and even crazier enough, this wall was finished in 1868, so they started in 1866 in the spring, and of course we are up here on Donner Summit. We get a lot of snow, as we know from this past year, and so while they were building this, the snow came down, the whole ravine filled with snow. They kind of got stuck. So what they would actually have to do was they had camps. They built tunnels going from the camps to the railroad tunnel sites that they were building to the China Wall so that they could work on it during the winter. They'd build, they had this whole system of under the snow tunnels. That's how they kind of moved around and were still able to work in the winter. Of course, very dangerous conditions. And so once they finally, they finished this in spring 1867. It started being put in use in 1868, and it actually was used all the way up until 1993. So, it had all these, newer generation trains going through it, all this heavier equipment, and the wall is still standing today and still in very great shape, crazy enough. Pretty unbelievable. We like to call it another 19th century miracle and another huge accomplishment in the 19th century.
So I'm curious, Nick, you talked about the work of the China Wall and the workers that would have been in charge of making that wall. What would it have been like to be one of those workers? What were their conditions like?
So that's a great question, and I can definitely say it was not an easy place to have a camp and live, and definitely not an easy place to work. And down at Donner Memorial State Park where I was, we have a great exhibit that shows that in our visitor center. How about we take a trip down there?
That sounds great.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're gonna wish ourselves down there again, a couple more huzzahs?
Yeah, a couple more huzzahs.
Wait. Since we're going to my state park down at Donner, I say we do this Donner style. At Donner, we say Zuha. So how about we all on 3 say Zuha and see if it works?
Let's try it.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Zuha!
Wow, we made it. We fell, but we made it.
Good job.
Where are we at exactly?
We are at Donner Memorial State Park here in Truckee, California, and we are in our visitor center, and more specifically in the Transcontinental Railroad and Chinese Railroad Worker exhibit.
Awesome. What do we have to show the folks here today?
Yeah, definitely. So we were talking just a couple minutes ago about how, what the living conditions might be. And so the living conditions definitely were not easy out there. Like we were talking about and showing you guys, it is very steep. We get a lot of snow out there. So the Chinese railroad workers set up camps kind of along the summit, along the ridges. And unfortunately, with all that snow coming down, we were kind of talking about those snow tunnels was the only way they could even get around, which is kind of crazy to imagine. But of course, with a lot of snow and steep slopes come avalanches. And unfortunately, a couple of avalanches took out some of the camps, led to some of the deaths. and definitely was not the most ideal living conditions. And not only were the living conditions bad, but also if we kind of go look more into the benefits of this job. So the Chinese railroad workers, they were expected to bring their own food, while the Irish, their co-worker Irish workers, were able to get food from the railroad companies. And so, you know, they would ship in food from Hong Kong, it would go to San Francisco, and then come out to the Sierras. And this was all very healthy food that the Chinese were bringing in. So this included food such as, like on our little wheel here, bamboo shoots, mung beans, bok choy. We also got abalone, kelp, and cuttlefish. So all these foods, very healthy for you, helped them get through the long days and long hours they were working. They were both healthy and strong. Whereas the Irish co-workers, the food that the Union Pacific was giving them, or the Transcontinental Railroad was giving them, was more of meat, potatoes. So they were not eating as healthy, which led to slower days, not as much energy, you know, definitely not built to work throughout all these long hours. And so that was one of the big things. And another thing, kind of focusing on the food and kind of what they were putting in their bodies, is that the Chinese were making tea while out there. This tea, you know, as you know, to make tea, you boil water. With that boiling of water, it filters out the bacteria. So they were putting in clean water into their bodies, whereas some of the co-workers were just drinking straight out of the lake, straight out of the streams. All that bacteria was getting in their systems. They were getting all those diseases and illnesses from that. So not only were they eating healthier, but they were also putting clean water in their body, which I can say for myself, highly recommend that, especially if you're working long hours. And in the middle of the Sierras is not a great time if you're not feeling good. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for showing off Donner Memorial State Park. I think it's probably time for us to go back. Thank you so much to everybody for wishing us to all these wonderful places today. I do hope you do wish one more time, otherwise we'll be sleeping over with you tonight, Nick. But let's see on the count of 3 if we can do it one more time and end up back in the museum.
Okay, ready?
All right? 1, 2, 3, huzzah! All right. Looks like we're back. We're not quite in the museum, but we are right outside the museum in Old Sacramento State Historic Park. Behind me is the Central Pacific Passenger Station, the western terminus of the Transcontinental Railroad. That's just a fancy way of saying the very final stop on the Transcontinental Railroad if you're heading west to Sacramento. So thank you for wishing us to all these great places. I'm glad you were able to wish us back here, otherwise we would have been staying with Nick. And thank you for joining us today. If you do happen to be in Sacramento, this is a wonderful place to visit, the California State Railroad Museum. Check out all the exhibits that you saw today, as well as our many others. And if you find yourself near Truckee, that's where Donner Memorial State Park is. So go say hi to Nick and let him know that Jake and Debbie sent you.
All right, great. Bye,
Thanks so much.
thanks.